Hello everyone, welcome to the advanced scanning module of the course. Now before we actually get started with performing any advanced scans and understanding port scanning, we are going to be setting up two virtual machines that contain our two vulnerable operating systems that have a list of all of very important services. Now the reason we're doing this is because we want some diversity when it comes down to the targets that we're going to be scanning, just so I can demonstrate some of the the really important scanning features that are operating system nuanced. So again, I'll be talking about Linux scanning and Windows specific scanning. So the two targets that I'm going to be using in this course, and they're very easy to set up and are absolutely free to utilize, are going to be Metasploitable 2, which is an intentionally vulnerable virtual machine that can be set up on VMware or VirtualBox. And again, Metasploitable 2 is already is a Linux box, and then we have Metasploitable 3. This is a Windows box, and it's based off Windows Server 2008. The only difference is that Metasploitable 2 already comes as an OVA file, which means you just need to click on it if you have VirtualBox installed, and it'll automatically set it up for you. With Metasploitable 3, you need to perform the build process, and the reason you need to do that is because it utilizes the free Windows Server 2008 evaluation trial, and to do that it needs to pull the ISO file manually. So the install process is very simple. If you're on Windows, you can run the PowerShell script, and if you're on Linux, you can run the build bash or shell script right over here, and it gives you instructions on how to do this. All the links to these resources or to these two boxes will be in the resources section of this video, so you can access them that way. If you have any trouble setting up and building Metasploitable 3, you can follow our build guide on hackersploit.org under Metasploitable 3 installation guide. It is a comprehensive guide with a free video tutorial. You can also check out the rest of our free video tutorials on our YouTube channel if you want more guides on how to set up Metasploitable 3. So again, Metasploitable 3 requires VirtualBox and Vagrant. It requires VirtualBox, Vagrant, and Packer. And again, you can actually run this on QEMU or KVM on Linux, or the virtual machine manager. That's if you're running on Linux, and you also have the ability to run it in VMware Pro. So again, it's entirely up to you. I personally recommend VirtualBox. That's what I've been using, and it's been working just fine. And again, as I said, this is based on Windows Server 2008. So again, you can follow all the installation instructions, and I'll post as many resources as I can regarding setting them up. So what I have here are the two files. So again, I personally set up my own OVF file for Metasploitable 3, and the Metasploitable 2 archive is a simple VMDK file. So it already is installed, and all you need to do is you just create a new virtual machine. So I'll just extract this, and we'll give that a few seconds just to complete the extraction process. I already have Metasploitable 2 and Metasploitable 3 set up, so I'm already ready to go. So I'll just wait for this to complete extracting, and I'll show you how you can set this up. With an OVF file, all you need to do is double click on it, and it'll essentially start up the wizard with VirtualBox to start the importation process. So with Metasploitable 2, you can see that it provides you with a virtual machine disk file. So if I click on that, you can see, because I already have Metasploitable 2 set up, I don't need to do it again. But again, you just need to click on the VMDK file, or to create a new virtual machine and specify the VMDK file as the actual disk. All right. So once you have that set up, I'm just going to delete that. We can then start up the virtual machines. So I already have my Kali box running. I'm just going to start up, let me just close one of these instances. I'm going to start up Metasploitable 2, and I'm just going to show you how that works. All right. So by the way, before you do that, you want to make sure that your network settings are set to bridged, and you want to go to network, and you're looking for your bridged adapter, and you want to make sure they are on your current Ethernet or wireless network interface, right? And you also want to do that for Metasploitable 3. So I'll also make sure that that is done. So this is bridged, and I'm going to start up Metasploitable 2. So this is our Linux box, right, that we're going to be using in our virtual lab. So that is started up. We'll give that a few seconds to start up, and I'll just take you through the actual login process. And All right, so once the startup is complete, you have the default credentials. You can log in with MSF admin and the password of MSF admin to get started. So again, you can simply type in MSF admin for the username, MSF admin for the password, and there we are. And again, you can check the interface IP just to make sure it's on your local network. And there we are, it's 192.168.1.121. All right, so that is our, so I'm just going to shut down this box now. So that is our Linux box. We then have Metasploitable 3, which is Windows Server 2008. So I'm just going to start that up and I'll show you how to log in and how everything is configured and how we'll be using the Windows firewall to perform scans. And when we start talking about firewall bypass, we'll also be covering that as well. So again, you can set this up if you want. If not, you can also use your default Windows installation. That could be Windows 10, Windows 7. It really doesn't matter as your target, but I would recommend setting up Metasploitable 3 mainly because it has tons of services that will be scanning. So you want to look for input, and I'm just going to insert Control Alt and Delete, and we want to log in as Vagrant, and the password is going to be Vagrant. Just going to hit enter. And you can see it's Windows Server 2008 R2. So we're just going to give that a few seconds to prepare our desktop, and you can then begin configuring the various services that you want and configuring the firewall based on what you want to test specifically. But with Metasploitable 3, I would recommend keeping the basics as they are. So it already comes pre-configured with vulnerable services. So again, if I type in my IP here, so IP config, you can see it's on our local network under the IP 192.168.1.38. Excellent. And then you can access your Windows firewall right over here. All right, so we'll give that a few seconds to load up. All right, so the Windows firewall is right over here. And again, you can enable or disable it. And this is very important because we'll be doing both, right? And the reason we'll be doing both is because I'll actually demonstrate and show you the differences. So you can see it's currently disabled by default, and you want to leave it that way. When after you've installed or completed the build process for Metasploitable, you want to disable that. And then of course you have your inbound and outbound rules, and by default the following ports will be actually closed here. So you can actually see that we have closed port for NetBIOS, MySQL, remote desktop access, and SMB. And I just added a test here, which I will just get rid of. And there we are. So those are our firewall rules. You want to leave the firewall disabled. And there we are. So now that we have our virtual lab set up, I'm just going to shut the machine down. And we can now get started with our advanced port scanning section and, enumeration, taking a look at Nmap scripts, so on and so forth. So again, I'll just turn this off, and we'll just change the reason to other, and I'll just say shutdown. There we are, and I'm just going to shut that down. And once we're ready to begin, we are now going to be running both of these virtual machines simultaneously. You can allocate as much resources as you currently have on your computer, and you can run them one by one based on the types of scans we'll be performing. As I said, we'll be performing Linux scans and then Windows-based scans, and I'll be showing you the differences, especially when it comes down to enumeration with Nmap scripts. All right, so that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be talking about the default Nmap scan. We'll also touch on the port states. However, that will also be explained as we proceed throughout the course. But let's get started with the default Nmap scan so that we understand what Nmap is doing by default, right? So a default Nmap scan, as the name suggests, is a scan that you run without specifying any options or arguments, right? And this is a default scan that will be performed if you don't provide any arguments or options regarding what you want to do exactly. So again, this is done by typing in Nmap and then typing in your target, which could be a URL, and you can perform your reverse DNS resolution by using the R command. Or you can provide the IP. In our case, we can the default Nmap scan will perform reverse DNS resolution for us. Let's start off by scanning the scanme.org website, right? So nmap.scanme.org, and we want to hit enter. So this is a default scan. Now there's a few important things about a default scan which we'll touch upon in a bit. So let's wait for this scan to complete. Now we are going to be using the other virtual machines that we set up, which is Metasploitable 2 and Metasploitable 3 as we move along, as we start talking about operating specific scans which do exist, and we'll talk about enumerating various services through the use of Nmap scripts. But for now, let's just talk about ports, right? Because that's very important right now. We've talked about host discovery, which is discovering in the devices that are online. Now let's talk about discovering ports on these devices. All right, so you can see that the default scan returns a few important bits of information. The most important bit here is it'll tell us that 996 ports are filtered. Now let me explain something. The default Nmap scan will scan for 1000 of the most commonly used ports, right? It will not scan the entire range of 65,535. You can specify that, and that's exactly what we'll be taking a look at in the next video. But the default scan only scans 1000 of the most common ports, right? So again, it tells us here that 996 ports are filtered. I'll explain what the port states are in a second. So we can see the default scan performs reverse DNS resolution and gives us the IP address for that particular domain. Apart from that, again, we get the IPv6 address, but that's really all it does. Now, you can see the ports that are open and the various services running on these ports, which, you know, is expected to be standard. We currently only have 4 ports that are currently open out of the 1000 that was scanned. I'm sure if we specify the entire port range, we'll be able to discover a whole lot more. So what we can see is that the results for the port scan are sorted out into 3 columns, right? So we have the port, which specifies the port number or displays the port number, and the protocol. In this case, it's TCP. When we perform a UDP scan, it will tell us that this is a UDP port. We then have the state of the port, which is either open, closed, filtered, etc. I'll get to that in a few seconds. And then we have the service that is running. So the service could be SSH, HTTP, etc., etc. And again, when we perform service version scanning, it will also display the version numbers, which you can then use for vulnerability scanning or vulnerability analysis, right? So right now, let's talk about the port states, which is very, very important, right? So your port states give you information regarding the port and what current state it's in. So when a port is open, what this indicates is that the service is open and is listening for active incoming connections, right? So that means you can interact with that particular port, right? It doesn't mean that the port is open to be accessed by anyone, in that you can authenticate it without you can authenticate to it without a password. It just means you can access it on that particular port, right? So for example, for port 80, we can see that this is a web server and the port is open. So if we go into our browser here and we type in the nmap.scanme.org.scanme.org, let's see if we get any results. So there we are. It takes us to this URL right over here, which indeed proves the fact that this port is open. And again, if we try and access SSH, it'll also work as well. So that's the open port. That is the open state for ports. Let's talk about closed, right? So if the state of a port is closed, this will essentially say, this essentially means that all the requests that we sent were received, but Nmap came to the conclusion, based on the responses we got back, or based on the responses that Nmap got back, that that port is closed, right, and is not accepting any connections, and there isn't any service running on it. All right. You then have the filtered state, right? So the filtered state is very important. The filtered state, as we'll take a look at when we're scanning Windows devices, actually indicates or will prove that there is some sort of packet filtering or a firewall that is blocking your scans from being completed, right? Or Nmap was able to come to the conclusion that there is packet filtering because again, there is no indication from the device, so it did not respond back or give us any feedback that Nmap could use to come to a conclusion as to whether the port is open or closed, and that means that it's filtered, right? So the packets are being filtered as they're incoming and outgoing, and that may indicate that there is a firewall in place. And in this case, you can see that it tells us for the rest of the 996 ports, those are all filtered. Now we'll talk about filtered ports when we'll be taking a look at firewalls and how to detect them and how to evade them. Let's take a look at some other port states, which are going to be the open filtered ports, right? So your open filtered ports essentially prove that, again, the port is active and open but again, an Nmap could not establish a connection or a state with that particular port. If it's closed, again, it means that the port is filtered or is being filtered, and the state could not be established. So those are your port states. Now that we understand a default Nmap scan and how the port scan results are displayed, we'll now take a look at the various port scanning options and the port ranges that you can specify when you're talking about port specific scans. So I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be talking about performing the fast scan with Nmap. The fast scan with Nmap is a really simple scan to understand. All you're doing is you're scanning for the top 100 most common ports, as opposed to your default scan, which scans for the top 1000 most common ports. So again, you're reducing the amount of ports you're scanning to the top 100 most common ports, and this of course is much faster. So one of the reasons you might want to use this is when you simply just want to have an overview of the 100 most common ports that are currently running on this device, and those range from FTP, SSH, HTTP, HTTPS, etc. So again, running it is very simple. We simply type in Nmap and we use the capital F, so minus capital F option, and then we specify the target. In this case, it's going to be 192.168.1. Let's see, 0.38. Let's run it on the Windows device, and I hit enter, or the Metasploitable 2 device, sorry, and you can see it'll tell us the host is up, and then we say not shown 86 closed ports. Again, that tells us the same thing. So 14 ports are open out of the 186 of them are closed. So again, it gives us a summary here. So you can see it gives us port 21, 22, 80, 135, 139, 445, 3306, which is MySQL, so on and so forth. So again, it's very comprehensive in regards to the types of protocols and services it is scanning for. These are very, very important or critical protocols. So again, this scan is entirely up to you based on when you feel you want to use it. Again, as I said, it's scanning for the 100 most common ports. And again, you can use this in conjunction with any of the other scan options that you have available to you, like service version detection. So again, I can run the fast scan option with service version detection, and we'll just wait for this to complete. Given that we're now performing scans for the service version versions, that will take it'll take a few more seconds. Or even up to a minute, but given that this is scanning for 100 ports, it shouldn't take too much time. So we're just going to let that complete the scan. All right, so the scan is complete, and that took about 1 minute and a few seconds. So again, 83.18 seconds, and there we are. It performed the scan on the 100 most common ports, and it gave us the service version detection for each of them. So again, you can use the fast scan whenever you feel you need to get like an overview of what services are running on it. And again, if you're looking for the 100 most common ones, this is the scan for you. But of course, you can also specify that with your port range. So it's entirely up to you based on when you feel it's appropriate to use. That being said, that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at output and logging and verbosity with Nmap. All right, so we have taken a look at a lot of different types of scans, and as we've been able to tell so far, we've been able to gather a lot of information from our targets and from our network. Now, one of the most important aspects of penetration testing is documentation, and for good reason, because at the end of every penetration test you need to generate a report, and you need to again cite various sources in your report, to actually prove that you were able to find information, how you came to various conclusions, how you made decisions based on what results, etc., etc. So it comes as no surprise that documenting each stage of your penetration test, even network scanning with Nmap, is extremely important, not just for documentation and report generation, but for your own sake. And the fact that you need to go back to results every now and then just to check for various services or anything you might have missed. And Nmap is no exception to how great a tool can be in regards to how you can output information. So with Nmap, you can output information into various formats, and after that, I'm just going to talk about verbosity after that, because verbosity has to do with the amount of information that is being displayed to the user through the terminal. It's not referring to the amount of information that will be stored in the file. So if we open up the man pages for Nmap, right, and we want to scroll all the way right to the bottom here, and we have the output options, right? So the output options are sorted in terms of we have three major output options with Nmap, or output formats. We have the normal format, which is text that a normal user can read, and you can store this in a TXT file or any human readable file format. You then have the OX option, which is XML, which again you can use to parse onto a web page, or to output onto any other interface that you would like to use. You then have the OG format, which is the greppable format, which is great for it's a fantastic file format that again is primarily used when you want to utilize it with a utility like grep. So that's why it's called the greppable format, right? And you have the ability to output them individually using the options here, or you can output all three of them and specify the file name, and it'll output that for you. So that's truly fantastic. Now, when you talk about verbosity, verbosity is simply referring to the information that is displayed to the user during the scan. It's not referring to the actual scan results. When we talk about output and the output options, that is referring to the scan results and how to output them into a file that can be saved or archived for later use. When you talk about verbosity, that just gives the user information about what's going on during the scan. And we have about 3 levels of verbosity, and they're all denoted by V, a single V, a double V, or a triple V, right? So we can actually do that right now. So what I'm going to do is we'll run a simple scan here. So we'll say Nmap, and we'll run a stealth scan, and we will perform an aggressive scan as well. And we want to make this a fast scan, right? So we just want to keep it to the 100 of the most common ports. And we can now specify the IP. So right, so we'll perform the scan on our Metasploitable 3 box, or our Windows box, and now we can output it. So we can output it individually into their own formats, and in our case, let's output into all 3 formats. So we specify a name. So I'll just call it Win2K8, right? Just to keep things simple. The file name is going to be Win2K8. And I'm going to hit enter, right? So it's going to perform the scan, and it's going to output all the options, all the results into the file Win2K8. And then given the fact that we're outputting it into all 3 formats, it's going to then assign the various extensions to these files, or to the file name. So we should have 3 output files in different formats. So I'm just going to wait for this scan to complete. All right, so the scan is complete, and as usual, we get our, we get an aggressive scan, gives us all the information we want. So it performs an operating system detection. It then performs service version detection. Then finally, it uses the default Nmap scripts to enumerate tons of more information regarding the services. So we can now list the directory here. And you can now see we have three files that have been output by Nmap, and these all contains the results that we can see in front of us. And again, we can then we can use utilities to view them that based on their file types or their formats. So for GNmap, that is our greppable output format, and then we have the Nmap file, which is human readable. So if I cat the contents of the Win2K8 Nmap file, you can see that is a human readable format, and that's exactly the output that Nmap gives us through our terminal, right? We can also open it up with like a text editor. So if I open up my my home folder, and you can see the results there, and if I open up the Nmap, I can open this up with a text editor, right? And you can see that this displays the results that in a human readable format. If we try and open up the XML file, you can see we can open it up through a browser. So I'll just do that right now. And again, it displays it in XML formats, which is why I specify that you need to parse this into a web page for it to make any sense if you are trying to make it human readable. So that's your XML format. We then have the greppable Nmap format. So again, you can cat the contents or use grep to look for whatever files or results you're looking for. So for example, if I say grep and I use so we just say grep smb, and I say win2k8.gnmap and hit enter, we don't get anything there. Let's see if I change this from something like let's see, SSH, right? So I hit enter, and you can see we can then use grep to display, you know, various strings and results based on the actual expression that we want to use with grep. So again, there's tons of output you know, capabilities that you in regards to what you can do with the output formats. And we can now take a look at verbosity levels, which is very interesting, as I said. So if we run the previous scan that we just ran here, but we now include a verbosity option at the beginning, wherever, and we say a single V, that's you know, that'll only display some of the information. If we increase it to a double V and a triple V, it'll increase the amount of information regarding the scan and what's happening to the user. So if we start off with a single V, you can see it starts displaying information that was not previously available. Previously, when we ran the scan without any verbosity options, it would not give us any output. It would just wait for the scan to complete. So we can see, first of all, the first thing that Nmap does is it loads all 151 Nmap scripts, and then it starts the script pre-scanning, and then it starts initiating the Nmap Scripting Engine, right? And then it performs the ARP ping scans to, you know, to actually to perform a host discovery, and it then begins parallel DNS resolution of one host, and then it initiates the SYN stealth scan on these particular ports. After it's done that, Nmap is able to come to a conclusion that you know, after we have specified 100 ports, so these are the ports that are currently open, right, and are currently online and are available to be interacted with. And then it completes the SYN stealth scan at the bottom on 100 ports, and then it begins the service scan, which is where Nmap takes quite a bit of time, and it scans 14 services, right? So let me just terminate this scan by you know, entering Control-C. And if I remove, well, we can actually keep those results. If we run the same scan and I increase the verbosity level, and you should see some more information now, and I hit enter. So now we can see a lot more information. Not too much, but you can see it starts the run level of 1 regarding the Nmap Scripting Engine, and this is something we haven't touched upon yet, but again, it displays more information to the user, more diagnostic information. And mind you that this output is not being recorded in the output file here that we have specified, right? So that is not being recorded. The only thing that's going to be recorded are the results of this particular scan. So that's verbosity level 2. What if we increase this to a triple V, right? And let's hit enter, and let's see. So again, it gives us a ton more information regarding what's happening during the scan. And for DNS resolution, for example, it tells us that one IP took 0.00 seconds, and then it gives us the various records here. And again, the service scanning is where, you know, Nmap starts taking time. So again, you get the idea. The verbosity level is just used for diagnostics when users want to know what's happening during the scan, so that they can, you know, they can make a decision based on the output they're getting as to whether to continue the scan or to stop the scan, or just to understand what exactly is going on. So again, that is verbosity. Now let's talk about outputting into the various 3 formats individually, as opposed to outputting all 3 formats, which can be a bit cumbersome to manage. So what I'll do is I'll go onto my desktop, right, and we can run the same scan here, but now instead of outputting it into all 3 formats, all 3 primary formats, we can output it into a normal file, which will be a human readable format. We can also do XML, and we can output into the greppable format, which we can as well. So in my case, I'll just use the normal output because this is human readable, and we'll just specify the file name. So we'll say win2k8, and we'll specify an extension like txt, just so that, you know, we have some consistency regarding the output. So again, we're running the same triple verbosity level, and we're just going to let that run. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait for this to complete, and I'll get back to you when this is done. All right, so the scan is completed, and again, just to prove that verbosity and the output of the scan results are different, if I list the contents of my desktop and I cat the contents of the win2k8.txt file, you can see that it did not save any of the verbosity or any of the information that was displayed to us on the terminal. However, it just displays all the it just displays all of the results from that particular scan. So there we are, we get the entire scan here, and again it gives us the various scan options that we used, which is great. That's a great thing with Nmap results or the Nmap output, is you get the date and time when the scan was initiated, and if, again, based on the intensity and the of the scan and the various scan options you're specifying, you can get very little to a lot of information from your scan. That being said, that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover in this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.